All right, we are now on air. Welcome to this video on absolute and relative positioning. Thank you guys for joining and being my live students as we go through the exercise. I want to start us off by sharing my screen so that we can dive into the different types of positioning available in CSS. And I think this is information that we've talked about before, but I want to go over it again just to set us up for the exercise that we're going to be doing. So there's four types of positioning. There's the static positioning, which is the default. There's relative positioning. There's fixed positioning, and then there's absolute positioning. As we scroll through the page, we can see what fixed positioning looks like. And static positioning and fixed positioning are very straightforward. And so we're actually not going to talk about them in the video. The more interesting bits are relative positioning and absolute positioning, how they play together, when do you use them, and how. Certain things have to be true in order for them to be able to be used. So I'm going to pause there. Does anybody have any questions yet? No? Okay. Then we can move on into our first exercise with relative and absolute positioning. What we have here is a very simple code example with some boxes. And these boxes right now have not had any positioning set to them. So box 1, box 2, box 3, box 4, and this long purple box right here, they automatically have the positioning of static, which is just like the normal, they take up space as you would expect. So I want to start us off with showing some of the code before we start making manipulations. When you look at our HTML, you'll see that we have an outer div with the class assigned to it called boxes. And inside of boxes, we have a div for box 1, a div for box 2, box 3, and box 4. And then down here, we have an empty dummy box, which was that purple box. So, and then as we move into our CSS, I'll actually leave the HTML up. As we move into our HTML, we see that we have our boxes, which is that outer div that contains the 4 boxes. And that these are all purely for styling. We don't have any styles here for positioning yet. So we have the box 1, box 2, the background colors. We have a pretty big height on the dummy box so that we can allow for scrolling. All right. So the first thing I wanted to show you guys was relative positioning. Like, what does it look like? How do you do it? So I'm actually going to take box 2, and I'm going to position relative. I'm going to set the position of this blue box 2 as relative. And you see at the surface, nothing happened. But if we were to do top 50 pixels, we'll see that box 2 moves down by 50 pixels. And what it did was it basically said, take your original positioning and relative to that original positioning, move from the top by 50 pixels. We could have also done left, let's say 100 pixels. And it's going to say move from the top 50 pixels and then move from the left 100 pixels. And then you can notice how box 3 stays in position, box 1 stays in position. The only thing moving right now is box 2. So now let's compare this with absolute positioning. So I want to set this into position absolute. You see immediately we have box 2, without saying left anything or right anything, we see that box 2 has gone over to the outermost, to the leftmost of our screen. We're going to investigate why that is. And another odd thing that happened was that box 3, which was once below box 2, has now moved up into the space that box 2 was once holding, which is not normal. Normally, when we're messing around with HTML and CSS, most elements maintain their space, and you don't normally have these overlaps like we're seeing here. And one of the reasons for that is absolute positioning. It takes your element outside of the flow so that in a way it becomes invisible to the other elements. Like box 3 right here, the pink one, no longer knows that box 2 exists. And that's why it's able to jump up and take box 2 space. And sometimes this is really helpful. Like when you want to put text over an image, or when you want overlapping type behavior, it can be very helpful to use absolute positioning. So another interesting thing with absolute positioning is, as opposed to relative positioning, is you can basically add relative positioning to any type of element, and then you can move it around with top, left, right, or bottom, and you're pretty much good to go. But when you're using absolute positioning, you have to think a little bit more critically, and you have to consider what is the parent of the element you just applied this position to. So to answer that question, we have to go back into our HTML. So we see that box 2 is a child of this div right here called boxes. And boxes, in turn, is a child of what we would call the body. But because we're in CodePen, we don't have to declare a body. But all of this code is within a wrapper called body. So the reason I'm telling you this is because when you're using absolute positioning, when you're using absolute positioning, it matters what the parent of the child is, because the parent needs to be set to either anything outside of static. So if we look at boxes, we see that boxes, it doesn't have a position given to it, so it has a static position. Okay, so that means if the parent is a statically positioned element, then the element that's using absolute positioning is going to go up even higher to another parent. And if that parent also doesn't have a positioning outside of static, then it's going to go all the way up to body. And like depending on like what's in your HTML, if you have a lot of elements, this can go through a lot of layers. But here we just have the box child, then the box's parent, and then the grandparent, if you will, which is the body that is encompassing everything. So do you guys have any questions? I know that was a lot. Okay.
No questions.
No questions? Okay. Okay, so I want to start showing you guys some examples of this whole parent-grandparent thing. Like I said, box 2, which is what we're targeting here, is housed inside of boxes. So boxes is its immediate parent. So normally, when you're dealing with absolute positive position, gotta make sure I'm still in position, right? TION. So normally when you're dealing with these normally when you have an absolutely positioned child and you need the parent to be something other than static, normally what you do is you set the parent to be relative. Because when the parent is relative, that is what is going to allow because that's what allows the child to be an absolutely position. It allows the child to be absolutely positioned without causing any unintended consequences, as what could happen if we set that position to be fixed. Because we saw before that fixed elements maintain their space and their coordinates on the page regardless of scrolling, and that's not always desired. And relative is more like an element that you can use in the background. So if there's no questions about relative and absolute positioning, I wanted us to jump right in to the hands-on portion and kind of just use some of the topics that we were just talking about. And I know it's a lot of information at once, but sometimes you learn best by doing, and then I can explain more as we go through the exercise. How does that sound?
Sounds
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I want us to so let me tell you guys what we're going to do. This is the final outcome. I basically made some example code that can use some improvements based off of absolute and relative positioning. So what we're looking at right now is the end product of how we want our user interface to look like. And if we go to our code pin right here, we'll see that so far we have the heart below the text, and we have our icons right next to the text. But in our final result, we want the heart icon to overlap the Perl text, and we want all of our check marks and X's to be on the rightmost portion of this page. Okay, so I'm going to go into our code pen, and I want you guys to take a moment to look at the code, and then together we're going to make the necessary changes so that this heart overlaps the Perl, and that these green check marks and that red X are over to the right. So looking at our code, we have this portion called the profile container. And then we have a banner up here. The banner contains the image and the text. And then the profile container contains these fields with the field answers. So I want us to just take this one piece at a time. So let's focus on the banner, and let's focus on getting our heart icon to overlap the Perl text. So when we think about absolute positioning and relative positioning, we can see right now that the banner text and our CSS, our banner and our banner image, none of them have any positioning assigned to them. So that means right now everything is just statically positioned. So thinking about absolute positioning and relative positioning, how would you guys want to attempt to have the heart overlap the text?
I think if we let's see. I'm not sure. I was going to say that if you do a fixed heart over the text, then it won't scroll, because I know the fix doesn't scroll. But if it's just out of absolute in relative, I'm not too sure.
Okay. What about the other students in the class?
I was gonna say maybe put the position to absolute and then just change the border to like maybe 50 pixels on the bottom.
Which would we set the heart to absolute, or would we be setting the text to absolute?
I think the heart. You set the heart to absolute and then just change the border to move it up.
Okay. What about our third student? Any suggestions?
I say, yeah, make the heart absolute. Yeah, make the heart absolute, but I'm not sure as far as what we're making relative though.
Okay. All right. So I think making that heart absolute is a good place to start. So I'm gonna go ahead, and this is there's a banner image that wraps our image. So I'm gonna go ahead and use that selector and say position is equal to absolute. Absolute. Okay. Do you guys remember what I was saying about? Yeah. Do you guys remember what I was saying about absolute position elements and like the parents and the grandparents and all of that?
Yeah. So would you set the banner image to relative?
Because the banner image is like the parent of the banner image.
Right. That's the parent, and you want to set that to relative because it's just in a static position now.
Yeah, we can try that. Okay, I got it back into being smaller.
Okay.
What else can we do with an absolute? So one thing I want to point out here is that when we say that when we take this banner image and we set it to absolute positioning, and then we take its parent and we set the parent to relative, what we're saying now is that we want this class, this image, to be kind of like bounded by its parent. So like if we were to assign top or bottom, like top 50 pixels or bottom 100 pixels or anything like that, then that means it's going to be relative to its parent. So wherever the parent happens to be, when we assign the child to be absolutely positioned, now we're saying bounded and look at the coordinates of the parent. And wherever the parent is, whatever offset we add to this child, use the parent as like the baseline. Because if we didn't assign it to its nearest parent, then it would go up the chain. So instead of this div being instead of the div being what's bounding, it could end up being the body or some other parent. So you really have to just like look at the case and look at what it is you want. And to highlight this, I want to show you guys this banner image class right here. When I hover over it, you guys can see that this is what we're putting it relative to when we said when we set the parent to be relative, we're saying that this image is going to be bounded by that class. If we were to take it off, now it's no longer being bound by the same parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that for now, and we can keep going. So the end goal is to have this heart overlap the pearl, right? So what is it we can do in order to get that to happen? What would be our next step?
Are we able to change the position of the text? No.
We could. We could, but
Probably easier just to move the image.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing because I wanted you to know that we could have moved the text, but we would have if we had chose to move the text, I think we should have had the image stay the same in the same place, just so that we don't have like two absolutely positioned elements if we don't have to.
Okay.
All right. So what was the suggestion?
Maybe taking the banner image and maybe changing the bottom to like 50 pixels.
Okay, let's.
Or is there some number to move it up a little bit?
Okay, I like that idea. So let's try 50 pixels and see where that gets us.
There we go. Now just move it to the right, like maybe 30 pixels or something.
Okay. Right.
Just a suggestion.
Yeah. Let's see where that gets us. Oh,
Bad idea.
Do you guys know why that happened?
No, I don't know why that happened.
Anybody else want to guess?
No.
Ruby?
Not sure.
Probably because it's a block element and it moved it all the way over. Is that it?
That's close. I think because I've been talking about it, but it's so much easier to explain when you have like an example in front of you. So this goes back to what I was talking about with this absolutely position element being bounded by its parent, its nearest parent that's set to a position other than static. Mm-hmm. So when we investigate how does the banner image show up on this page, and we're looking at right here at our inspect our dev tools, we see that the banner image is a block level element, like Reggie said, and you see this highlighted rectangular bar. Mm-hmm. That is the entirety of that value. This is where the absolute position child coordinates come from. So when we set the child to be 30 pixels from the right, it uses parent. So the parent is way over, it stretches, it's a block element, so it stretches like basically the width of the page. And it says from this parent, set it 30 pixels from the right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and we could put a bigger number in to move it over, or is there an easier way?
Yeah. We could just go ahead and say maybe, let's see what 500 pixels gets us. Almost there. Let's say 600. 700.
There it is.
Yeah.
Then maybe want to bring it up from the bottom just a little bit more. Like that. So yeah, that was definitely one way of doing it. And does anybody want to summarize what we just did?
We used the well, it looks like we just used the we were able to move the heart and to cover the text. Mm-hmm. Let's see. With absolute positioning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we basically moved a box within a box, pretty much, right?
Yeah, we moved the box with like the reference point being another box.
Right.
Yeah. And also, you know, we decided to move the heart into the text, but we could have easily had instead decided to move the text into the heart. So I actually want us to do it the other way. Just for demonstrative purposes, I don't think there's any like ideological reason for like choosing to move the heart versus the text. I just want us to have enough experience with this. So who wants to lead us on moving the text Pearl into the heart?
So in the CSS, you would find the div class of banner text.
Mm-hmm. You have banner text right here.
Okay. I wonder if you could just set the top to like 60 pixels, or do you have to go back and actually set the positions and everything with the text?
Okay, well, we can try it. Let's see what happens if we do top 60 pixels. Yeah.
It didn't move.
Uh-uh. What was the other idea that you had?
I guess we could set that position to absolute.
Okay.
And then the class of banners set that to relative.
Okay. We want to set banner and to be relative. So we're gonna bound the text by the That didn't seem to work.
That didn't do it.
Nope.
I need a little help.
All right, anybody want to help, Reggie?
I don't know. I was thinking, well, the heart was in the center, and I was thinking banner text. You could just do text align center for the text, and it might overlap the heart if it's in the same position. But that's all I could think of.
So what were we saying? To have the text be...
Well, it's already, never mind, because it's already in the center. It's just not on top of overlapping the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe if you change the banner div, change the padding to maybe 20 pixels. I'll just probably move it down. I won't move the text down, I don't think.
Also, Pearl.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What was that, Ruby?
I was asking, because I know you mentioned about them being from the same parent, like child and parent type situation. Now, could that have something to do if they both belong to the same parent? Could that and they both have the same positioning in same location as far as pixels? Could that if they're both equally the same, would that make them in the same spot within the page?
Yeah, if they're both set to absolute positioning and like they're both taking up the same coordinates, then you would see sometimes an overlap happen that way.
Okay. Well, how about that's the question is, I guess, how do we do that so they would overlap?
Well, you can do it with absolute positioning. You can do it with relative positioning.
Pro, I had another suggestion.
Okay.
Like maybe change the div class of banner to absolute, and then the banner text class to relative.
Okay. And what would you expect to happen? Absolute.
And then
banner text to relative.
Yeah. That didn't work at all, Pearl. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I want to show what's happening right now. So we had, when we set banner to be absolute, whenever, just like when you set anything to be absolute, you're taking it outside the flow. So all the other elements, what that means is when you take something outside the flow, like an element outside the flow, all the other elements pretend like it's no longer there. So normally you see that banner is a div, and divs are block level elements. That means they usually hold their space and they take up the whole the width of the they normally take up the whole width of the screen. But whenever you set anything to absolute, it's like it no longer exists. So like you see how full name and Pearl McPhee has been pushed to the top, and the banner no longer exists, and it no longer is holding that space. And it's because of this class right here.
Okay.
Because of the style right here, position equals absolute. So normally with absolute positioning, like when you set something to be absolute, normally it's smaller things on the page. Because normally a banner is something that we want to be able to hold space. We want it to be basically like a rectangle at the top, and we don't want anything to override the entire banner. So whenever you don't want an element to be completely overridden, you might want to use caution when assigning it a style of absolute.
Okay.
And that's another reason why normally when you need a parent to be something other than static so that you can have a child be absolute, it's good to use relative positioning. Just because a relative positioning is no longer static, but unless you do something like top equals 60 pixels, you're not gonna have anything be off kilter. It's like you have to be very deliberate in order to have anything you change because of position relative. So
but can you have the parent and the child be set to position relative?
Yeah, you could.
Okay.
But because relative positioning doesn't depend on its parent.
Okay.
It's only absolute positioning that does.
Okay.
Yeah. So any other suggestions for how we could? Right now we have both the banner and the banner text as position relative. Any other suggestions on how we can get this text down into this heart?
I'm not quite sure.
I'm thinking that we can, since we have the banner text, which is Pearl, as a relatively positioned thing, I'm thinking we could do something like top 100 pixels. That didn't work exactly like I wanted it to work. Do we know why that is?
Maybe because you changed the div class banner to just static.
No. So what happened was we set banner text to be position relative when we set top 100 pixels. And what happened was the text moved down 100 pixels, but so did the heart. Normally what I was expecting when I did that was I was expecting the heart to stay where it was and the text to move down 100 pixels. And when I look at the code, I see what our problem is with this particular thing. We have this banner text class equals Pearl, and then housed inside of it as a child, we have this banner image. So so banner text is actually including both the text Pearl and the image. And so that's why they're a group when I did position relative top 100, and they both moved down 100.
So can you make banner image its own parent, so that the when you put banner text Pearl at 100 pixels, that the image, banner image, won't move, and then the Perl will overlap it?
Yeah, I think I can go ahead and move this ending for the banner text, so that banner text is just Perl, and then banner image is its own thing, and we no longer have the text inside the image.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more semantic as well, because technically banner text was just Perl, and banner image was its own thing.
Okay.
So I'm going to remove the indentation so that it's easy to see that banner text and banner image are siblings, which means they're on the same level. Mm-hmm. Usually when you have an indent like that, that means it's a child. So they're siblings. So now we see that when we go back to our UI, we see that the text is now below the image, which makes me think maybe 100 pixels was too much. Okay. It looks like, I guess 55. Okay. So it looks like when I set banner text to be position relative, and I ensured in the HTML that the only thing targeted would actually be just the text and not also the image, it looks like that's when I was able to move the text down by applying the style top 55 pixels. So now we see that our text is 55 pixels from the top relative to its own starting position.
That makes sense. I understand that.
Okay. Any questions about this?
Well, at first I can say I was a bit confused because I was only focusing on the CSS portion of it and not the HTML. But it makes sense as far as when we spoke about the child and parent. If there's two children within the one parent portion, then they will all follow the same rule, which is why we had that situation in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, so there's one way to solve it with absolute positioning, and then there's another way to solve it with relative positioning. And I think you're going to see often that you can use your own discretion as far as when do you use absolute positioning versus when do you use relative. And there's always more than one way to solve a problem. Because we could have just as easily have said we wanted to solve this with banner text being absolutely positioned. We could have done that too.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So now I want to move us into the next portion, which is to get these check marks and that red X to appear on the right. And I want to step us through the HTML real quick, just so that we know what we're looking at. And then I'm going to step back and let you guys drive. And I'll just take instructions from you guys as far as like how we should go about solving the problem. So I wanted to point out that we have an outermost div called profile container. And if we look at our CSS, profile container doesn't have any styles applied to it. It's just a div. And then we have something called a field wrapper. This field wrapper div includes a field. So we have full name is a field. And then we have Pearl McPhee as a field answer. So you see that we have a class field answer Pearl McPhee, and then we have an image, and that's the image for the check mark. And all of these follow the same idea. So we have full name, we have location, and we have age, quote, and about. So we see that field wrapper doesn't have any styles. And then field wrapper contains a field. And we see that the field is basically saying we want the background to be blue, the color to be white. We're setting it display inline block. so that it instead of taking up the full width, it's leaving some room for the answer. And then we see we have a field answer class, which is basically setting the color to be blue. And it's setting the font size and some padding. So we don't have anything, we have a class right here, a selector right here that's targeting our check marks, but it's only targeting it so that it's setting the height to 25 pixels and the width to 25 pixels. So what we want to do is we want this image, those check marks, to appear consistently on the far right side. If we go back to our ideal mock-up, you see all these check marks and are on the right hand side. So I'm gonna be quiet, and I want you guys to talk amongst yourselves. Just like process everything, like the problem itself, and throw out any suggestions and ask questions of each other.
I think well, what seems easy and it might not be the correct way is to target the field, not the answer, but the check marks, and text align right for all of them, and it should end up on the right side of the page.
So just so you know, I'm being quiet now, so that you guys can talk amongst yourselves. So if the other students want to respond to what Ruby said, you guys can.
I'm not sure if this will work, but I was thinking maybe setting the list style position to right for that CSS class of field answer P. That was my only suggestion.
What about you, Sierra? What do you have?
Oh no, I was thinking somehow make something relative, but I don't know what. Something absolute. Well, we know absolute takes things out of its flow. Check marks need to be out of its flow, so I say change it to absolute. But I don't know if that's gonna work.
Okay. Okay. Well, for Ruby and Reggie, I think there's more than one way to get these check marks to the right. So like you could play around with text align right or on the list styles. But I wanted this to be an exercise on using relative and absolute positioning. So that so that you guys did practice with this. And it could be like another tool in your toolkit when it comes to doing CSS layouts. Because you're right, you could use other things outside of these two positionings. But I want us to just stick to using relative and absolute positioning for our first solution.
Gotcha.
And also, I also just want to walk you guys through this on the in our dev tools real quick, just so that you guys can get an idea of. So this is. Can you guys see the blue highlighting on the background?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So this is our outermost container called profile container. And then looking at our very first answer question set, we have field wrapper. So field wrapper encompasses like this entire row. And then, was somebody gonna say something?
No, go ahead, bro.
Okay, so field wrapper is this entire row. And then field name is that entire blue box. So it encompasses the full name text and it also has some padding, which is denoted in green. So it's the entire box to the left. And then field answer, we see only spans the answer itself. And then we see the image, the check mark, is just to the right of the field answer. And it also only just takes up enough space for it to be 25 by 25 pixels. So using absolute positioning and relative positioning, what would be an idea for getting these check marks to the right? Sierra, I heard you throw out something earlier.
I was saying do absolute, but I don't know.
Absolute on what?
Absolute on the image.
Okay. If we did absolute on the image, what would we want? Okay, let's start with absolute on the image. So we got set position to absolute. Okay. All right. So we have the images and they're absolutely positioned. How do we get them to the right?
Okay, so we only just talking about absolute and relative positioning. We don't change pixels or anything.
No.
No. Okay. I guess then we gotta look at the parent. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Which parent do you think we should look at? Oh, let me pull this back up.
Okay.
So we have the profile container itself. We have the field wrapper, which is the row. Then we have the field itself on the left. Then we have field answer on the right, and then we have the image. So, and that's also important to note that this image is positioned absolute, and this field answer and also this field name, these are siblings. They're all on the same line and same level, and they're all children of field wrapper. And field wrapper is a child of profile container.
So the parent is field wrapper is what you're saying?
Well,
the siblings is what you said.
Field wrapper is a sibling?
Yeah, so I'm saying that this image is a sibling of field answer and it's a sibling of field. And all three of these elements are a child of field wrapper.
Okay, field wrapper. Okay.
So
and we don't change padding or nothing, none of that stuff, huh?
No, you shouldn't have to do any of that.
Okay. Let's see.
Well, can we just make this a parent of itself or wrap it in its own dev and not dev. Let me see. Wrap it in its own div. Continue to keep it absolute. Let's see. I'm not sure. That was all I had.
Are we going to change the position of the field wrapper, maybe? No.
Yeah, we can. I just want to respond to what Ruby said.
Oh, sorry.
We can't make things parents of themselves. Just like you can't have a human child be its own parent. You can't have these individual elements be a parent of itself. It could be a parent of another element that comes that it wraps around.
Okay.
And we also shouldn't have to create divs just for styling purposes or like just for layout purposes. Given how this HTML is laid out, we should be able to use pre-existing divs in order to do our layout.
Okay.
And Sierra, you're saying you wanted to suggest doing something with field wrapper. So field wrapper is this entire row. What do you want to do with it?
Well, I guess since we're dealing with positioning only, we already set the image to absolute already.
Yep.
Well, can we try to go ahead and change field wrapper to relative?
Okay. Okay.
It didn't do anything?
No. But that doesn't mean it's wrong.
Can you stroll over it in DevTool? Let me see what it looked like.
What, the image?
The wrapper part.
Okay. This is the wrapper.
Okay. It don't look like it did anything.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe change it around.
What do you mean by change it around?
Make the wrapper absolute and the image relative.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Okay, so the image you want to put to relative. Okay.
Oh, goodness.
Whoa.
What's going on here?
Oh, it's taking up everybody else's space. Something is.
Well, it's more like all of our field wrappers are now position absolute. So now none of them really are taking up any space. Like they're taking out of the flow. And this is what happens sometimes when you have all of these multiple elements set as absolute. They just get overlapped on top of each other because like they're all being offset from the same coordinate. So it's basically like all these field wrappers need to take up this space right here. So that's exactly what they're doing.
All right, can you reset that back then?
Okay, I'll put this back to relative. And then I'll put the image back to absolute. Because I think this is a good this was a good call to have the field wrapper be relative. Because remember what I was saying, when you have these type of elements like that are blocks and they're structural and they're for your layout, you don't normally want to set those to absolute.
Okay, so it's okay for field wrapper to be relative, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna keep that as relative field wrapper?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Then we need to play around with field answer then. No?
Why? Okay. What do you want to do with field answer?
Let's see what happens when that becomes absolute, I guess.
What do you think is gonna happen? What would be your guess? Like when I put in position absolute, what would you expect to see?
Well, when you did it with the image, it really just moved up a little bit. So I don't know if it's going to get disproportionate with that image or not. That's why I want to just try it and see.
Okay. Any other guesses on what this is going to do? No? Okay, drum roll. Okay, that's what it did.
Okay, so what just happened? The check marks went
to the left.
To the left.
Do we know why that happened?
Okay. It went to the left because check marks are still an absolute, right? And we changed that to absolute. We got two absolute things there. So, oh no, Pearl. Both of the elements got taken out of flow.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Pearl.
Yeah, well, the check marks were on the right. They were absolutely positioned before. when we had so before we set the field answer to be absolute, the check marks, even though they're absolutely positioned, expecting the field answer space because field answer was in the float. So they're saying right after you get done, I'm going to display myself. But when we set field answer to be position absolute, the check marks no longer have to respect the field answer because field answer has been taken out of the flow. So that's why they're aligning themselves right after the field. So like right after full name and location after those boxes, because these boxes still exist. So so that's why they're appearing right after. But yeah. So I would say if you ever find yourself in this type of position where there's one small thing that you want to target, and you want to target with absolute positioning specifically, then you shouldn't have to set any of its parents to absolute positioning.
Okay.
It's very, 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 very rare to have both a child and a parent be absolutely positioned.
Okay. Well, let's change to relative then. Shoot.
But again, you wouldn't. So the image right here is a sibling of field answer. So when the image is position absolute, but remember, when something is absolutely positioned, it matters what its parent is. It doesn't matter what its siblings are.
Okay.
So remember what we could do with like the left and the top and the bottom and all that?
Yeah, I thought you said we couldn't play around with that.
No, I said you couldn't play around with padding.
Oh, okay.
The left and the top and the bottom, that goes along with position absolute and position relative.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, let's do something with that then. Shoot.
So what should we do?
We should apply some right to the what that called the field answer then.
So you want to go to field answer and add right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That way it'll push the check mark all the way over.
Okay. How much do you want to add to right?
Reggie, I can't see it no more.
Like 200 pixels?
Okay. So nothing happened. Why is that?
You applied that to the field answer?
Yeah.
Maybe it has to be applied to the image.
Yes. You can't. Okay. You can only do the right, left, top, bottom when the element itself has been set to position absolute or position relative. You can't just apply it willy-nilly to its siblings.
Okay.
Okay, so you can, hold on. Okay, so you can only apply it to an absolute position thing?
Yeah, if it's absolutely positioned or relatively positioned, or if it's fixed.
Okay.
Okay, we didn't have. There was no position applied. You took it off, huh?
To what? Field answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, field answer didn't have any type of position.
Okay. So image still has absolute on there?
Yeah, image still has absolute.
So we can use that to do
add some pixels?
Right, yeah, right 200 pixels or something.
Okay, so when I do right 200 pixels, what are we expecting to see?
The check mark move 200 pixels to the right.
It's gonna move to the left, right?
Oh, what are we doing left?
Yeah, so do left 200 pixels.
Yeah. Okay, so we can do left 200 pixels. Okay, let's just do the left 200 pixels and see what happens. Okay, so what happened?
Move to the left.
That's why I said right.
Okay, so let's try right.
There you go.
Okay, so I guess do like, I don't know.
Add some more.
500 pixels?
Okay, we can do 500. Let's see.
Maybe 50 pixels.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I see.
All right. So the 10 looks nice, and the 10 is what we want, but why?
Because it's moving 10 pixels from the right of the screen.
Yeah, but why is it moving 10 pixels from the right of the screen?
I mean, well, you mentioned that only with certain positioning apps, with certain positioning, you can have, you're able to move, well, I guess an item is able to be moved, but only with those positioning, like the, what was it? When we tried to move the answer, it didn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the answer didn't have any positioning set to it. But I guess the question that I'm asking is, we set, so this is saying move from the right by 10 pixels. But why, what is its reference point? Like, why is it saying, like, when we say right to the 10, right, 10 from the right, why is it saying, like, why is it going from that rightmost part of the screen? Why doesn't it say going right from 10 pixels from fill name? Like, why isn't it showing up over here by 10 pixels? Why is it showing up way over here by 10 pixels instead?
I think because a div takes up the whole width of the screen, and since this image is within a div, it's going to go from the all the way from the edge of the screen over 10 pixels instead of a different location.
Yeah, that's getting closer to it. We have this image being absolutely positioned, and like I said before, absolutely positioned elements, they take reference from their nearest parent that isn't set to static. So in this case, it's looking at field wrapper, and field wrapper itself takes up the whole screen. And field wrapper, remember, we set field wrapper to be relative. So it meets the condition of being its nearest parent that isn't set to static positioning. So because field wrapper takes up this whole web, it's using field wrapper as a reference point. So it's really saying right 10 from whatever is the end, the rightmost part of field wrapper.
So okay, I get that, but if the parent was in, say, a maybe wasn't in a div, or maybe was static, then we wouldn't be able to position it the way we wanted it to.
It really depends on a case-by-case basis. Okay. So I took off the position relative from field wrapper, and you see it held the same, right? But that's because it just goes up, and you see it because field wrapper is like this. So field wrapper takes up the whole width of the screen, and it's no longer set to position relative. So that means it's statically positioned. So so this image just absolutely positioned. It's going to say it's going to ignore field wrapper, and it's going to go up a level and say, okay, I didn't find my parent is statically positioned, and I need something that's not statically positioned, or is the highest level, the highest level parent, like the grandparent or the great parent, whatever the case may be. So in our case, it just so happened that field wrapper was the same width as this body. So had we said, I'm going to give you guys an example. Let's say we wanted to set a width of 80%. So we see right now that I said, just for illustrative purposes, field wrapper no longer takes up the entire width. You see, it just takes up the blue portion. So now field wrapper is not a full width element, right? But and you see it's set to position relative, so our image is still being offset from the right by 10 pixels from this from that right. I can't hover over it, but you guys see the right border of the filled wrapper, and we see that our image is offset from 10 from the right of it, and it's set to position relative. If we took off this position relative, our image is no longer going to respect filled wrapper as a parent because it no longer meets the qualifications of being a parent that is not set to static.
Mm-hmm.
So static's the default. If you didn't assign a position to it, it's set to static automatically.
Okay.
So now, because it can't use filled wrapper as its reference point, it's going to go up to body and use body.
Because it's the grandparent, right?
Yeah, because it's the highest most, not just because it's his grandparent, but because it's the highest most element right here. And like it basically couldn't find a parent that wasn't set to static, so it's just going to go all the way up to the top.
Okay.
So if we put filled wrapper back into being a relative position, it's going to go back to respecting filled wrapper.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that filled wrapper, because I put it for a width of 80%, is being offset from 10 from that smaller width. But I can just go back and put it at 100. And it's going to look like how it looks.
Got it.
Okay. So does anybody want to summarize real quick what we just did?
That's a lot to take in, Pearl.
Yeah, I know.
I guess the important thing to remember when thinking about positioning is thinking about its parent, I guess. When we're doing absolute position, consider the parent.
Yeah.
That's what I'm taking from it.
Yeah, that's a big takeaway.
Okay.
Yeah, because when you use relative positioning, you use the element itself as its reference point. So you could do top, and it's going to be from the top of the element's original positioning. But when you're messing around with absolute positioning, you have to look at its parent. And not only do you have to look at the parent, but you got to see, is the parent set to, does the parent have a position set? And if it doesn't, then you have to look at its grandparent. And if the grandparent doesn't, and there's another parent, you have to look at that parent.
All right. That was a good thing that you just said. I wish you could say it again. You said, say it again, Pearl.
Well, what did you hear? It's good to recall.
You said, look at the grandparent and look at the parent and see if it's positioned. And if not, then you need to look at the grandparent.
Yeah.
And then if not that, I forgot what you said.
Then just keep going up the chain. Like it depends on how complicated your HTML is.
Okay.
Yeah. If your HTML has like a whole bunch of children and parents and everything's nested, then you just have to go up the chain.
Okay.
And if it finds nothing, then it's just going to go off of like the it's usually just the entire body of the window. Okay. Which is what we saw. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you use relative positioning, you don't have to worry about this because you only have to look at the element's original positioning.
Okay. And you said most cases using absolute position is good for overlapping behavior and small things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. When you're overlapping something, because of the way HTML works, it's like blocks on blocks and everything is respecting each other's space.
Yeah.
Kind of like Tetris or something. To like get out of that flow, absolute positioning, it works really well because then you can just have something override something else. But like we saw with the heart and the text, you can wherever you can use absolute positioning, there's usually a way to also use relative positioning.
Okay.
So just use your judgment. But always avoid setting any type of layout, block level, structural type element to be absolutely positioned, because then it's no longer going to be able to do a structural component. Like when we set the banner to be absolute positioning and it messed everything up, you don't want to take out those type of elements from the flow.
Okay.
Any other nagging questions or thoughts?
Nope, you've answered my questions.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys for joining me on this first edition of Advanced Topics.
Right. Thank you, Pearl.
Thanks, Pearl.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Thank
See
you.
you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.